I want you to take a second and really just inventory how you felt waking up this morning. Like, do you ever feel just inexplicably, bone-tiringly exhausted, even after you've logged a supposedly full 8 hours of sleep?
Right.
Or maybe you find yourself struggling with these sudden, like, out-of-nowhere mood swings that just feel completely disconnected from what's actually happening in your day.
Which is incredibly common, honestly.
It is. Or perhaps, and this is the one I hear most often, you found that despite eating meticulously well, tracking everything, doing all the quote-unquote right things, your body just isn't cooperating.
Like it's fighting back.
Exactly. It feels like you are constantly pushing a massive boulder uphill just to maintain a baseline of feeling normal.
Yeah, and it's a completely pervasive experience right now. And a real tragedy of it, I mean, is that people tend to internalize that struggle.
Oh, absolutely. They blame themselves.
Right. When the diet doesn't work or the fatigue just doesn't lift, the immediate assumption is, well, I must lack willpower or I have some personal biological failing.
But the stack of research we are diving into today completely shatters that assumption. The problem isn't your willpower.
Not at all.
The reality is that there are these invisible puppet masters pulling the strings on your energy, your mood, and your metabolism every single second of the day.
And those puppet masters are your hormones.
Yes. And the materials we are looking at today, ranging from deep pharmacological texts and cutting-edge mitochondrial research, like the Miss B study,
Which is fascinating, by the way.
so fascinating, down to clinical data on circadian biology and even theoretical quantum physics. All of it points to a frankly shocking truth. Modern life is actively waging a hidden multi-front war on your endocrine system.
The scope of it is what is truly staggering to me. We're looking at a level of environmental and lifestyle disruption to the human neuroendocrine system that is, well, it's entirely unprecedented in our evolutionary history.
Right, because we just haven't been exposed to this before.
Exactly. Our biology evolved to expect a very specific set of signals from the world around us. Instead, we are basically bombarding it with static.
And our mission for this deep dive is to isolate that static. We are going to dig into this massive stack of sources to uncover exactly what is hacking your system.
The tangible chemical saboteurs.
And the invisible lifestyle traps, yeah. But more importantly, we are going to look at the specific evidence-based ways you can fight back.
And recalibrate naturally.
Right, using everything from the timing of your meals to the physical frequencies of light hitting your eyes. Okay, let's unpack this, because we have to start with the physical environment.
Definitely the physical environment.
Right, because the most direct, aggressive assault on your hormones right now is coming from the everyday compounds we touch, breathe, and ingest.
Yeah, and to really grasp the mechanics of this assault, the literature points us back to a defining moment in environmental science, the 1991 Wingspread Conference.
Wingspread.
Yeah, this was the moment scientists from multiple disciplines finally coalesced around a formal definition for what we now call endocrine disrupting compounds.
Or EDCs for short.
Exactly, EDCs. And the resulting Wingspread definition classifies an EDC as, well, any substance, whether anthropogenic, meaning man-made, or naturally occurring, that alters the synthesis, secretion, transport, binding, action, or elimination of natural hormones in the body.
I mean, that is a remarkably broad definition.
It's massive.
It basically says if a compound touches any part of the hormone assembly line or the delivery network, it's a disruptor.
It had to be broad, though, because the mechanisms of interference are incredibly diverse. Historically, when we look at the pharmacological texts, the focus was on the legacy chemicals.
Right, the stuff we already know is bad.
Exactly. These are compounds that are largely restricted now but leave a lasting scar. So polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, which were everywhere in electrical equipment.
And DDT.
Right, the infamous agricultural pesticide.
Yeah.
And perhaps the most tragic example in the medical literature, which is DES, or diethylstilbestrol.
Oh man, the DES story in these sources is just harrowing.
It really is.
It was a synthetic estrogen, right? Heavily prescribed by doctors to pregnant women for decades to prevent miscarriages before anyone realized the horrific downstream effects.
Yeah, and the latency of the damage is what makes the DES case so critical for understanding EDCs today, because the women who took the drug largely felt fine.
But the compound was actively disrupting the fetal development of their children in utero.
Yes, It caused severe, irreversible reproductive tract anomalies and incredibly rare vaginal and cervical cancers in their daughters.
And even affected their granddaughters, didn't it?
It did. It echoes through generations.
Which brings us to the really terrifying part of the contemporary research, because those are the legacy chemicals, the ones we know about, the ones we ban.
The easy targets, so to speak.
Right. But the stack of papers we are looking at now focuses on the modern, inescapable EDCs. We're talking about BPA, widely used in hard plastics, and the epoxy resins lining canned foods.
And fellow
Yes, phthalates, which are plasticizers that make materials soft and pliable, but they also act as carriers for synthetic fragrances in almost all commercial cosmetics and perfumes.
And we can't forget the fluorosurfactants, chemicals like PFOA and PFOS.
The forever chemicals.
Exactly. They are what give products their water-resistant and grease-resistant properties, so they are what make your non-stick skillet non-stick and your rain jacket waterproof.
But the ubiquitous nature of these compounds is what I struggle to wrap my head around. Like, the sources note that phthalates are literally used in the protective enteric coatings of pharmaceutical pills.
Yes, the very pills you take for your health.
Right. You could be taking a medication to fix a health issue, and the physical coating of the pill is dosing you with an endocrine disruptor.
It's incredibly counterproductive.
And the thermal receipt paper? BPA is used as a developer in the paper itself.
Yeah, the receipts are a perfect example of how stealthy this exposure really is, because the BPA isn't bound into a plastic polymer structure there.
It's just loose on it.
It's basically a powdery film on the surface of the paper. So when you grab a receipt at the grocery store, the natural oils and moisture on your fingers actually facilitate the transdermal absorption of BPA.
Directly into your skin.
Directly into your bloodstream. It completely bypasses the digestive system.
Wow. So it's like a hacker getting into a cell's private encrypted communication network and just like sending fake text messages to the rest of the body.
That's a great way to look at it.
You think you are just holding a harmless piece of paper, but your body receives a chemical message that structurally looks exactly like a massive flood of estrogen.
Precisely.
So mechanically, how is this hack actually taking place inside the cell?
Well, that is the core of the pharmacological research we're looking at. These chemicals do not just passively float through your bloodstream.
Right.
Because their three-dimensional molecular structures bear a really striking resemblance to our endogenous natural hormones. They actively infiltrate the cellular machinery. They target and bind to nuclear hormone receptors.
And once they bind, what happens?
They generally do one of two things. They can act as agonists.
Meaning they activate it.
Right, meaning the EDC perfectly mimics the natural hormone, turns the key in the receptor lock, and triggers a massive, completely inappropriate cellular response.
Rawr.
Or they act as antagonists, so they jam themselves into the receptor lock and basically break off, so to speak.
Like putting the wrong key in and it gets stuck.
Exactly. They don't trigger a response themselves, but they block the real hormone from getting in. So they effectively silence the necessary biological signal.
But the sources go even deeper than just receptor blocking. They talk about these EDCs actively sabotaging the biological manufacturing plants themselves.
Yeah, this is where the damage becomes truly systemic. The texts detail how EDCs directly target specific steroidogenic enzymes.
Steroidogenic.
Right, so you have to picture steroidogenesis as a highly orchestrated assembly line in the body.
Okay, an assembly line.
Your body starts with cholesterol. And through a series of very specific enzymatic conversions, it turns that cholesterol into pregnenolone, then into DHEA, and eventually into testosterone, estrogen, or cortisol.
And the enzymes are the workers on that line.
Exactly. And two of the most critical workers on this assembly line are the enzymes 3-beta-HSD and CYP17.
And let me guess, the EDCs take these specific workers out.
Precisely. EDCs have been shown to inhibit the active sites of 3-beta-HSD and CYP17, or even downregulate the genetic expression that creates these enzymes in the first place.
Oh, so this stopped the body from even making the workers.
Yes. So when you neutralize these enzymes, you aren't just blocking a hormone signal at the end of the line. You are fundamentally rewriting the body's baseline manufacturing instructions. You're bottlenecking the production of vital androgens and estrogens right at the source.
I mean, I understand the biochemistry there, but looking at this from a practical public health standpoint,
That's right.
it's maddening. If we have the molecular data proving that BPA and phthalates inhibit 3-beta-HSD and hack our nuclear receptors, how are they still legally permitted in our microwave popcorn bags, our couch cushions, and our drinking water?
Well, it's because EDCs fundamentally break the traditional rules of toxicology. And our regulatory frameworks, honestly, they just haven't caught up.
How do they break the rules?
The foundational dogma of classical toxicology is that the dose makes the poison.
Right.
So regulators look for linear, monotonic dose responses, and they test for immediate, acute toxicity.
Like, how much does it take to cause obvious harm right now?
Right. If a high dose of a chemical kills a lab rat, they find the lethal limit, and they just regulate everything below that.
But hormones don't work like that.
Not at all. Hormones, and by extension these EDCs, operate on non-monotonic dose response curves.
What does non-monotonic mean in this context?
It means the effect doesn't just go up in a straight line as the dose goes up. Sometimes a massive dose of an EDC actually shuts down a receptor entirely due to biological overload.
So it looks like nothing is happening.
Exactly, causing no immediate observable effect. But an infinitesimally small dose, I mean parts per trillion, akin to a drop of water in an Olympic swimming pool, might perfectly mimic a hormone and trigger a catastrophic cascade during a critical window of development.
Like fetal development in the womb, like with the DES story?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this introduces the most challenging aspect, which is the long latency period. The consequences of early life exposure often remain entirely undetectable for decades.
Wow.
If you are exposed to a phthalate in utero, the resulting disease, whether that is premature infertility, severe endometriosis, or a hormone-dependent cancer, it might not clinically manifest until you are 35 years old.
And by then, linking a specific diagnosis in adulthood to a specific chemical exposure that happened in the womb, I mean, that's epidemiologically incredibly difficult.
It's nearly impossible to prove in a standard regulatory framework.
The sources take this latency concept to a place that is almost, I don't know, it's hard to process. They discuss epigenetic reprogramming.
Yes, epigenetics.
The research suggests that the chemical on a popcorn bag today doesn't just alter your hormone baseline right now, it alters the expression of the DNA in your germline cells.
This is truly the frontier of the research. EDCs can cause DNA methylation or alter histone acetylation.
Which means what exactly for the average person?
It means they don't change the underlying genetic code, like the letters of your DNA remain exactly the same, but they change the tags on the DNA that tell the body which genes to turn on and turn off.
Oh, I see.
So if an EDC causes abnormal methylation in the reproductive cells of a developing fetus, that altered genetic expression is passed down.
You are looking at a scenario where a chemical exposure today can dictate the endocrine health of a grandchild who hasn't even been conceived yet.
It's a sobering thought.
That is a staggering reality to confront. It paints a picture of a massive, multi-generational chemical assault.
It really does.
And naturally, when you read through that kind of literature, the immediate instinct is to look at everything man-made with suspicion. The logical jump is, okay, synthetic plastics and chemicals are the enemy, so the solution is to go entirely natural and plant-based.
Right, the appeal to nature.
But the next stack of sources in our deep dive throws a massive wrench into that assumption, because nature has evolved its own highly potent endocrine disruptors.
It is a really critical nuance to understand. We have to examine phytoestrogens.
Phytoestrogens, plant estrogens.
Yes, these are naturally occurring, non-steroidal plant compounds that structurally resemble mammalian estrogen close enough to actually interact with our endocrine system.
Where do we find these?
The primary classes we look at in the human diet are isoflavones, which are heavily concentrated in soy and other legumes, and coumestans, which are found in high amounts in clover, alfalfa, and certain sprouts.
The historical context provided in the sources for this is fascinating because this isn't a new discovery at all. The texts document a phenomenon from Western Australia in the 1940s that became known as clover disease.
Right, the sheep.
Yeah, farmers observed that their flocks of sheep, which were grazing on pastures incredibly rich in specific strains of subterranean clover, just began suffering from massive systemic reproductive failure.
It was a full-blown agricultural crisis.
Yeah.
The sheep were experiencing permanent infertility, extreme cystic ovaries, and severe endometrial pathologies.
And it wasn't some synthetic pesticide causing it. It was the clover itself.
Exactly. The sheep were consuming massive, concentrated loads of coumestans.
But, I mean, why would a plant evolve to basically sterilize the animal eating it?
Because plants are engaged in their own evolutionary arms race. They can't run away from predators.
True.
So producing potent endocrine disruptors is actually an incredibly effective biological defense mechanism. If the animals that graze on a specific plant become less fertile, the population of those predators drops, ensuring the survival of the plant species.
That is a brilliant, silent form of population control.
It's nature at work.
And structurally, how do these plant estrogens compare to the synthetic plastics we just talked about? Because you would naturally assume the synthetic plastics are stronger, right?
Interestingly, it is often the exact opposite.
Really?
Yeah. When you look at the binding affinity, which is how tightly and aggressively a compound locks into a cellular receptor, phytoestrogens generally have a higher binding affinity for nuclear estrogen receptors than many of the man-made EDCs.
They are better at it than the chemicals we make.
They are exceptionally efficient at mimicking endogenous estrogen. Furthermore, the sources detail how they don't just act as simple receptor mimics.
What else do they do?
Phytoestrogens can actively modulate that DNA methylation we just discussed, and they can strongly inhibit tyrosine kinases, which are vital enzymes responsible for transmitting communication signals within the cell.
Wow. Which brings us to the great dietary paradox outlined in the research, the role of soy in the human diet.
Oh, this is a heated topic.
Extremely. Because on one hand, you have the FDA historically allowing health claims about soy protein reducing the risk of heart disease.
Right.
You walk into literally any health food store and see isoflavone supplements aggressively marketed as natural remedies for menopause symptoms.
They're everywhere.
But the endocrine research paints a dramatically more complicated and frankly concerning picture of what high soy intake actually does to human biology.
The clinical literature is highly complex, yes, and heavily context-dependent. But there is a clear consensus that high, continuous intake of soy isoflavones induces unintended hormonal shifts.
Like what?
In women, heavily soy-dominant diets have been correlated in multiple studies with significant menstrual cycle irregularities and, concerningly, an acceleration of female puberty.
And in men.
In men, although the data is fiercely debated, several prominent studies link high soy consumption to measurable decreases in serum testosterone levels and alterations in sperm quality.
I want to zero in on a specific data point from the sources that just completely stopped me in my tracks. It concerns soy-based infant formula.
Yes, this is a crucial data point.
The text explicitly states that standard soy infant formula contains roughly 40 micrograms of total isoflavones per gram of powder.
That is a staggering concentration when you factor in the body weight of an infant.
Exactly. The researchers adjusted for body weight to compare it to adult consumption, and they found that an infant fed exclusively on soy formula is taking in an isoflavone load that is 4 to 7 times higher than the amount consumed by an adult eating a traditional, highly soy-based Asian diet.
Wait, really? 4 to 7 times higher?
Yes. You have to consider the biological reality of what is happening there. You are taking a developing neuroendocrine system, an infant whose body is highly sensitive to the most microscopic hormonal signals, and you are flooding their immature liver with an astronomical load of plant estrogens every few hours, every single day.
Because they just eat and eat and eat.
Exactly. And the liver pathways responsible for metabolizing and conjugating those hormones are simply not fully developed enough to handle that volume. I mean, I understand the historical precedent of Clover disease in sheep, but applying this to humans, how should we process this? It completely flips the script on what it means to eat a quote-unquote clean diet.
It really does.
You're telling me my supposedly healthy soy protein shake could be causing as much cellular confusion as drinking out of a hot plastic water bottle.
It requires a paradigm shift in how we view the natural world. The core takeaway from the sources is that we must value multiple perspectives in biology.
How so?
Understanding naturally occurring disruptors like phytoestrogens is vital because it strips away that appeal to nature fallacy we talked about.
Right. Natural doesn't mean safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shows us that organisms evolve to respond to chemical signals in their environment, regardless of whether those signals were engineered in a lab or synthesized in the roots of a legume. Nature is not inherently benign.
A compound's origin, whether it's natural or synthetic, does not dictate its safety.
What matters is how that compound interacts with the incredibly delicate, highly tuned lock and key system of your neuroendocrine network.
So we have the tangible threats. The plastics we touch, the chemicals on our receipts, the plant defense compounds we ingest. But the research introduces a third category of disruptors that are entirely invisible.
They're non-chemical ones.
Right. They aren't chemicals at all. Our sources reveal that the physical dimensions of light and time are just as critical to your hormonal health as anything you put in your mouth.
This takes us into the realm of circadian biology.
Which is fascinating.
We all possess a fundamental awareness of the 24-hour biological clock, mostly in the context of feeling jet lagged.
Sure.
But what is often misunderstood is that this circadian rhythm is the master conductor of your entire endocrine system. It dictates the precise timing of hormone synthesis, metabolic rate, digestive enzyme release, and core body temperature fluctuations.
The sources outline this beautifully through the mechanics of the circadian rhythm diet, and it all begins in the brain, specifically with the pituitary gland, right?
Yes. According to the research on circadian signaling, the pituitary requires a very specific environmental trigger to actually start the day.
And that trigger is light.
A specific blend of blue and red light frequencies during the morning hours.
How does the brain even know what light is hitting it?
This is mediated by specialized cells in your eyes called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells.
That is a mouthful.
It is. But basically, these cells aren't primarily for seeing shapes or colors. Their job is to measure the frequency and intensity of ambient light.
Oh, like light meters.
Exactly like light meters. When they detect the specific wavelengths of natural morning sunlight, they send an electrical signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain,
Okay.
which then activates the hypothalamus-pituitary axis.
And when that axis is activated by the right morning light, the sources say it initiates the production of a hormone called pregnenolone. Why is pregnenolone the focus here?
Because pregnenolone is the master biological precursor. If you go back to that steroidogenic assembly line we discussed earlier,
Right, the factory line.
pregnenolone is the raw material at the very beginning of the belt. It is the foundational molecule from which your body derives almost all other steroid hormones: progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, estrogen, and cortisol.
So if you don't start that process right,
If you do not get that proper morning light signal, the pituitary does not fully trigger the pregnenolone cascade. The entire downstream production line is structurally compromised from the very moment you wake up. You are operating on a hormonal deficit all day long.
and this light dependency works both ways too. If natural morning light is the vital catalyst, the sources highlight artificial light at night as a profound disruptor
It is arguably the most pervasive disruptor in modern society.
because of screens.
Yes. In our evolutionary history, bright blue light only existed during the peak of the day. When the sun went down, the only light available was the warm, red-shifted glow of a fire. Today, we stare at LED screens, emitting massive amounts of blue light at midnight. When that blue light hits your retina at night, it sends a daytime signal to the brain, completely halting the pineal gland's production of melatonin.
But the sources suggest the damage goes way deeper than just, struggling to fall asleep. They detail how the circadian disruption actively damages the cells themselves, specifically hampering something called mitochondrial fusion.
This is a really critical biological mechanism. Mitochondria are the energy-producing organelles in your cells, but they aren't static. They are highly dynamic.
They move around.
They change shape and interact. Under healthy conditions, particularly during the rest phases of the circadian cycle, mitochondria need to physically fuse together.
Why do they fuse?
This fusion allows them to share genetic material, repair damage, and maximize their efficiency for synthesizing ATP and facilitating that steroidogenesis we talked about.
Okay, so they team up to heal and work better.
Exactly. But pervasive blue light at the wrong time disrupts the molecular signaling required for this fusion, so the mitochondria remain fragmented and inefficient. You are effectively suffocating your body's ability to produce cellular energy and hormones at a microscopic level.
The texts also paired this light disruption with the timing of our food intake. The sources talk specifically about the hormonal chaos caused by late-night eating.
The endocrine system operates on strict temporal rhythms. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is designed to peak in the early morning to mobilize energy and wake you up.
Right, get you out of bed.
It should then gradually decline throughout the afternoon and evening. But when you eat a heavy meal late at night, the digestive process forces a surge in metabolic activity. This keeps cortisol levels elevated precisely when they should be at their absolute lowest.
And it also spikes your insulin.
Exactly. You are flooding the bloodstream with glucose and insulin right as the body is attempting to enter a state of metabolic rest.
So you're sending mixed signals.
Terrible mixed signals. By keeping insulin spiked and cortisol elevated at midnight, you not only suppress melatonin, but you completely block the nighttime release of human growth hormone, or HGH.
And why is missing out on HGH such a big problem?
Because HGH is the ultimate repair mechanism. It is secreted primarily in massive pulses during the deepest stages of slow-wave sleep. It is responsible for cellular regeneration, tissue repair, maintaining lean muscle mass, and metabolizing fat.
So if you blunt that HGH release with late-night food and blue light, you basically wake up biologically unrepaired.
You're starting the next day already behind.
Contrast this modern lifestyle, Eating pizza at 11 p.m. while scrolling on a smartphone under bright LED lights with what the sources state is an absolute biological requirement, a 12 to 14-hour overnight fast.
That fasting window is non-negotiable for endocrine health.
Why so long?
The digestive system requires immense amounts of energy to process food. When you fast for 12 to 14 hours overnight, you withdraw that energy demand from the gut.
Oh, giving it a break.
Yes. This allows the body to shift its resources towards cellular housekeeping. It lowers systemic inflammation, induces autophagy, which is where cells clear out damaged proteins, and most importantly, it gives the liver the uninterrupted bandwidth it needs to efficiently detoxify and clear out circulating hormones, preventing estrogen dominance and receptor burnout.
So when I look at all these lifestyle factors combined, it's like we are forcing our bodies to play a symphony, but half the orchestra is in entirely different time zones, reading completely different sheets of music.
That's exactly what it feels like.
The eyes are telling the brain it's high noon because of the phone screen, the gut is telling the pancreas it's breakfast time because of the midnight snack, and the cellular clocks are utterly derailed. The resulting biological music is just, well, chaotic noise.
Chaotic noise is a perfect description.
Yep.
It is a state of profound systemic physiological confusion. The neuroendocrine system relies on predictable, rhythmic signals to function, and we are feeding it nothing but conflicting, erratic data.
Which brings us to the deepest, most microscopic level of this crisis.
Let's go there.
Because we have covered the external factors, the plastics, the phytoestrogens, the artificial light, the mistimed meals, but the sources reveal that all of these external assaults ultimately converge to wage war on our internal ecosystem. Specifically, they devastate our cellular batteries, the mitochondria and the microbiome in our gut.
To truly understand this internal battleground, we have to look really closely at the MISS-B study.
MISS-B. Mitochondrial stress, brain imaging, and epigenetics.
Yes. This research is fundamentally shifting how we view human biology by pioneering the mapping of what they call the mind-mitochondria connection.
It redefines what mitochondria actually do, because we always hear the cliche that they are the powerhouses of the cell, but this research says they are so much more than that.
Calling them a powerhouse is a severe oversimplification at this point. The MISS-B research forces us to view mitochondria as incredibly sensitive environmental sensors and central processing units.
Like computer chips.
Exactly. Yes, they transform the oxygen we breathe and the food we eat into ATP energy. But that energy is required to power every single mind-body process. Mitochondria are the foundational physiological infrastructure that literally produces subjective human experiences, thoughts, and emotions.
And they do not work alone. The sources highlight an intense bidirectional relationship between these cellular batteries and our gut microbiome.
The gastrointestinal tract is home to over 100 trillion symbiotic bacteria, fungi, and viruses.
Trillion with a T.
Yes. And this microbiome acts as a virtual endocrine organ in its own right. These microbes aren't just fermenting dietary fiber down there. They are actively synthesizing neurotransmitters.
Like serotonin.
Right. They're regulating peripheral insulin resistance and directly controlling the production of incretin hormones that dictate feelings of satiety and hunger, such as ghrelin and leptin.
The sources outline how fragile this gut hormone connection is, though. They specifically mention the impact of alcohol.
Oh, alcohol is a major disruptor here.
It notes that regular alcohol consumption alters the gut microbiome and the liver's metabolic pathways so significantly that it drastically increases circulating estrogen levels in both pre- and postmenopausal women.
Yeah, and this comes down to a specific subset of bacteria in the gut known as the estrobolome.
The estrobolome?
Yes. The estrobolome's entire job is to metabolize and modulate the excretion of circulating estrogens.
Okay, so it clears them out.
Exactly. When alcohol disrupts the balance of these bacteria, the estrobolome becomes dysfunctional. Instead of excreting excess estrogen, the gut actually reabsorbs it back into the bloodstream.
Oh, wow. So you get a buildup.
Right, leading to systemic estrogen dominance, which heavily impacts mood, weight retention, and even cancer risk.
But the most intense, illuminating part of the MISS-B research, at least to me, is how it mechanically explains the concept of stress.
It finally puts physical science behind the feeling.
Exactly. We are universally told that, stress is bad for your health, but it always sounds like a vague psychological platitude. This research finally provides the exact, undeniable biological mechanism for how a bad day at work physically destroys your body.
It does this through the concept of mitochondrial allostatic load.
Allostatic load.
Right. To understand this, we first must define allostasis. Allostasis is the body's active, anticipatory process of maintaining stability through change.
So it's how you adapt to stress.
Precisely. When you experience chronic psychosocial stress, say relentless financial worry or ongoing trauma, your brain perceives a constant threat to your survival.
And how does the body physically react to that perceived threat?
To survive the threat, the brain mounts a highly coordinated, massively energy-demanding stress response. Your entire autonomic nervous system shifts into sympathetic overdrive.
Fight or flight.
Yes. This forces your cellular metabolism into a state of hypermetabolism. Your body starts rapidly burning through finite energy reserves to keep you hypervigilant, to keep your heart rate elevated, and to pump glucocorticoids into your bloodstream so you are constantly ready to fight or flee.
But the key here is that the cellular energy pool is finite.
That is the critical constraint of human biology. Energy is finite. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the mitochondria are the literal physical bridge between subjective psychological stress, how anxious you feel in your mind, and objective biological damage, how your tissues actually break down.
Because they have to choose where the energy goes.
Exactly. When the brain forces the body into hypermetabolism, the mitochondria are forced to make a ruthless biological choice. They must divert precious finite cellular energy away from long-term, longevity-promoting processes.
So what processes get shut down to fund the stress response?
Basically everything related to maintenance. Energy is systematically stolen from cellular growth, it's stolen from DNA damage repair, stolen from immune surveillance, and stolen from the synthesis of reproductive hormones.
All just to deal with the stress.
Yes, all that energy is handed over to the immediate survival response. Over time, this chronic, unrelenting diversion of energy leaves the cells physically dilapidated. It exponentially accelerates biological aging and sets the stage for chronic disease.
The sources highlight the terrifying speed at which this cascade occurs too. It's not something that takes years to start. The research notes that if you experience an acute psychological stressor, your biological pathways react instantly.
Instantly.
The stress increases your heart rate in a matter of seconds. It elevates glucocorticoids like cortisol in a matter of minutes. And within hours to months, it fundamentally alters your gene expression, actually downregulating the genes that protect you from inflammation.
It is a complete systemic hijacking of your biological resources.
The analogy that comes to mind here is a smartphone.
Okay, how so?
It's like a phone running an incredibly heavy, demanding GPS app in the background all day long. The chronic stress is draining the battery so fast and running the processor so hot that there is simply no power left for the phone to run basic operating system updates or even make a simple phone call.
The system crashes.
The system crashes. So the ultimate question is, how do we plug the phone back in? How do we force the system out of hypermetabolism and recalibrate?
Well, this is where the literature pivots from diagnosing the pathology to providing the clinical interventions.
Right.
We have painted a deeply concerning picture of how modern life sabotages the endocrine network, but the sources provide highly specific, actionable, and entirely natural solutions to reclaim control of those baseline hormonal rhythms.
Okay, let's start with the most immediate physical tools we have, our dietary defenses.
Right.
The sources are remarkably specific about macronutrient manipulation. Let's look at protein. The guidance is a strict requirement to consume 25 to 30 grams of high-quality protein at every single meal. Mechanically, why is that specific number so important?
Because 25 to 30 grams of protein is the threshold required to achieve two specific endocrine goals.
Okay, first goal.
First, that bolus of amino acids directly suppresses the secretion of ghrelin from the stomach lining.
Ghrelin is the hunger hormone, right?
Yes, ghrelin is the potent hunger hormone that signals the brain to seek out calorie-dense foods. It is the hormone that makes you overeat. Suppressing it provides immediate behavioral control.
And the second goal.
Secondly, unlike steroid hormones, which are built from cholesterol, a vast number of your body's hormones are peptide hormones, meaning they are physically constructed from amino acid chains. You literally cannot synthesize hormones like insulin, oxytocin, or growth hormone without an adequate dietary supply of amino acid building blocks. So you need that protein.
Got it. And alongside prioritizing protein, the sources mandate a drastic reduction in added sugars. But they specifically single out fructose. Why is fructose uniquely damaging to the hormones compared to, say, other sugars like glucose?
The metabolic pathways are entirely different.
How so?
Well, when you consume glucose, it circulates in the blood and can be taken up and used for energy by virtually every cell in your body. But fructose, however, can only be metabolized by the liver.
Only the liver.
Right. And the literature shows that the exponential increase in isolated dietary fructose over the last few decades is a primary independent driver of hepatic insulin resistance.
Hepatic meaning liver.
Yes. When you flood the liver with fructose, it triggers local inflammation and fat accumulation, which physically blinds the liver's receptors to the hormone insulin.
Oh, wow.
This initiates a cascade of systemic metabolic dysfunction, totally independent of whether the person is gaining weight.
Then we move to fats and fiber. The sources advocate for a high intake of healthy fats, specifically highlighting MCT oil, avocados, and omega-3 fatty acids. And they pair this with a high intake of both soluble and insoluble fiber to physically stimulate the mechanoreceptors in the gut that release fullness hormones, like CCK. But I want to understand the mechanism behind the fats. How does eating fat fix a hormone problem?
The omega-3 fatty acids are particularly crucial here. The cellular membranes that house all your hormone receptors are actually made of a lipid bilayer. They're made of fat.
Okay.
Incorporating high levels of omega-3s increases the fluidity and sensitivity of these cell membranes. Furthermore, the clinical data demonstrates that omega-3s act as powerful anti-inflammatory agents that actively prevent cortisol levels from spiking out of control during times of acute stress.
So they buffer the stress.
They essentially buffer the endocrine system's stress response right at the cellular level.
The sources also point to broader dietary patterns, explicitly naming the Mediterranean diet as a therapeutic tool. A diet heavily structured around whole grains, wild-caught fish, and specifically cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, and kale. The texts cite this diet directly as a mechanism to reduce excess estrogen levels in the body.
Yeah, and the mechanism there is twofold. First, the high fiber content in the Mediterranean diet binds to metabolized estrogens in the gut, ensuring they are excreted in the stool rather than being reabsorbed into the bloodstream.
Keeping the estrobolone working.
Exactly. Secondly, those cruciferous vegetables contain specific phytochemical compounds that actively promote the liver pathways responsible for safely breaking down and eliminating potent proliferative estrogens.
Which lowers cancer risk.
Significantly.
Yeah.
It lowers the risk of hormone-driven malignancies like breast and ovarian cancer.
The sources also address the inevitable hormonal changes associated with aging, particularly menopause. And the research here provides a very sobering, yet I think empowering truth.
Yes, regarding HRT.
Right. While they acknowledge that hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, is a highly valid, heavily researched medical intervention for managing severe menopausal symptoms, they emphasize that there is no magic hormonal fountain of youth.
No pill will stop the aging process.
Exactly. The interventions with the absolute highest tier of clinical evidence for naturally ameliorating aging-related changes like the increase in visceral abdominal fat and the rapid loss of lean muscle mass are consistent physical activity and long-term moderate calorie restriction.
Exercise is fascinating in this context because its benefits extend far beyond the simple physics of just burning calories.
What else does it do?
The sources detail how high-intensity interval training, heavy resistance strength training, and sustained cardiovascular work physically alter the architecture of your cells.
Really? Like physically change them?
Yes. The mechanical stress of muscle contraction upregulates the density of glucose transporters on the cell surface and actively increases hormone receptor sensitivity. It physically makes the locks on your cells more responsive to the hormone keys.
That is wild.
And again, it happens completely independent of whether the number on the scale changes.
I want to pause here because this is where the research fundamentally shifts how I view nutrition and fitness. We are constantly inundated with marketing about eating clean or burning fat. But structurally, mechanically, you are saying that the timing of our fast, the mechanical strain of exercise, and the ingestion of specific fats like MCT oil aren't just about calories.
No, they are not.
They are acting as highly specific signaling molecules that tell the body to stand down from a state of biological panic.
That is exactly the paradigm shift required here. Take MCTs, or medium-chain triglycerides, as an example.
Okay, let's unpack MCTs.
Due to their specific carbon chain length, MCTs bypass the traditional lymphatic fat storage pathways entirely.
So they don't get stored as fat.
Right. When ingested, they go directly to the portal vein and straight into the liver, where they are immediately oxidized into ketones for usable energy.
Instant energy.
By providing the body with immediate, clean, easily accessible cellular energy, and by utilizing omega-3s to blunt the cortisol spike, you are nutritionally signaling to your mitochondria that the environment is abundant and safe.
Wow.
You are actively turning off that hypermetabolic stress response we discussed earlier. You're using food as the environmental data.
Food as environmental data. That is incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
But as comprehensive as diet and exercise are, they are ultimately just physical tools addressing physical pathway. To fully heal that intricate mind-mitochondria connection and comprehensively repair the neuroendocrine system, the sources insist we have to look deeper. We must incorporate psychological, neurological, and even quantum interventions.
Which brings us to mind-body mastery.
Exactly. The final and I think most profound section of our sources.
If chronic psychosocial stress is the primary driver of mitochondrial allostatic load, then we must address the psychological inputs directly. We simply cannot out-eat or out-exercise a brain that constantly perceives itself to be under mortal threat.
It's impossible.
This is where the clinical trials on meditation become impossible to ignore. Regular, sustained mindfulness and meditation practices have been shown in clinical settings to physically and measurably restore the pulsatility of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH, emanating from the hypothalamus.
I want to make sure I understand that. Restoring the pulse. Why does a hormone need to pulse?
It is a critical feature of the endocrine system.
Yeah.
Hormones, particularly regulatory hormones like GnRH, are not released in a continuous, steady stream.
If they were, what would happen?
If they were, the receptors on the receiving cells would quickly become desensitized and downregulate, effectively ignoring the signal. They are released in highly specific, rhythmic pulses. Chronic, unrelenting stress physically flattens that pulse, which disrupts the entire downstream reproductive axis.
And meditation brings the pulse back.
Yes, the clinical data shows that lowering sympathetic nervous system tone through meditation actually restores the GnRH pulse. This, in turn, normalizes the ratios of luteinizing hormone, LH, and follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH.
The master regulators.
Exactly. Furthermore, it physically reduces the serum levels of highly inflammatory cytokines, specifically IL-6 and TNF-alpha. These non-pharmacological interventions have proven exceptionally effective in clinical settings for women suffering from complex endocrine disorders like polycystic ovary syndrome or PCOS and hyperandrogenism, where systemic inflammation and broken pulsatility are the root causes.
What is truly fascinating about this modern, rigorous clinical data is how perfectly it mirrors ancient Eastern philosophy detailed in our sources.
It really is a striking parallel.
The texts reference traditional Chinese medical frameworks that explicitly link the physical health of the endocrine glands and the cultivation of sexual energy directly to optimal brain function.
The conceptual overlap is undeniable, even if the vocabulary differs entirely.
Right. The sources outline a highly specific Taoist practice called the Wanjing-Bu meditation.
Yes, the Wanjing-Bu.
The practitioner uses intense visualization to draw sexual energy, what they view as the body's most potent vital force up the spine to physically nourish and repair the brain. Then, through focused breath work, they drop that qi, or energy, down into the lower abdomen, a region called the dentin,
To store it.
to store it and charge the internal bodily battery. When you read that alongside the Miss B study, they are essentially describing the mind-mitochondria connection centuries before the invention of the microscope.
They observed the physiological reality of energy diversion and allostatic load, and they developed somatic practices to consciously override the stress response and redistribute that biological energy.
It's mind-blowing.
And the sources we are analyzing push this boundary of non-chemical intervention even further, venturing into the highly theoretical realm of quantum biology. We have documents detailing a theoretical, non-invasive therapeutic device called the Ellenizer.
Right, the Ellenizer. The documentation refers to it as an advanced quantum biological device, and its stated goal is to completely eliminate complex menstrual problems and hormonal imbalances without the use of any pharmaceutical drugs. Mechanically, how is a machine supposed to achieve that?
The theory underlying the Ellenizer relies heavily on a biophysical concept known as quantum entrainment.
Quantum entrainment. Okay.
The fundamental premise is that the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, the HPO axis, which is the delicate feedback loop regulating GnRH, FSH, LH, estradiol, and progesterone, operates not just on chemical gradients, but on specific electromagnetic frequencies.
So the device is emitting a frequency.
The theoretical application involves applying specific, harmonizing, ultra-low frequency electromagnetic impulses directly to the pelvic region and the neural pathways connecting to the hypothalamus.
To do
The goal is to entrain the neural network. If the nervous system is locked into a chaotic, erratic firing pattern due to chronic stress, the chaotic noise we discussed earlier, the device introduces a strong, rhythmic, harmonious frequency.
And the body copies it.
That's the idea. The theory of quantum entrainment suggests that the chaotic biological system will naturally sync with and adopt the stable frequency of the device, thereby rescuing the neural network from stress firing and restoring hormonal balance.
The texts take this quantum perspective down to the subatomic level, too. They discuss this concept that steroid hormones require proper electron partnerships.
Yes, electron partnerships.
It theorizes that for a molecule of progesterone or estradiol floating in the cytoplasm to actually penetrate the wall of the cell nucleus and deliver its genetic message, it physically requires a partner molecule to ensure it has the correct electron spin or charge balance.
It is a perspective that views endocrinology through the lens of biophysics rather than pure biochemistry. It suggests that molecular interactions are governed by resonance, charge, and electron exchange at the quantum level.
I have to push back here, though. Because as someone reading through these sources, this sounds like pure science fiction, especially when we compare it to the hard, undeniable molecular chemistry of the EDC plastics and the CYP17 enzymes we discussed in the first half.
That's a fair point.
If I am someone struggling with severe fatigue or a broken metabolism, how am I supposed to practically integrate the concept of quantum entrainment or drawing Qi up my spine into a Tuesday morning routine?
The skepticism is entirely warranted. We are operating on the very bleeding edge of theoretical biology here. However, what is vital for a practical learner to grasp is the underlying synthesis of all these approaches.
How do you mean?
You could look at healing through the reductionist lens of lowering your serum cortisol via mindful yoga. You can look at it through the ancient lens of moving qi in traditional Chinese medicine to nourish the dantian. Or you can look at it through the highly theoretical lens of quantum resonance and training a chaotic neural network.
But they all point to the same thing.
Regardless of the vocabulary, biochemistry, mysticism, or quantum physics, the ultimate biological objective is exactly the same.
To get the system out of danger.
Precisely. The objective of every single one of these practices is to aggressively shift the autonomic nervous system out of a chronic threat state. It is about actively cultivating a physiological state of safety.
Safety is the key.
Only when the mitochondria and the brain perceive safety can that delicate pulsatile release of GnRH and other master hormones return to its natural evolutionary rhythm. We are ultimately trying to tune the human system like a highly sensitive musical instrument, manually moving it away from the dissonance of modern stress and back into biological harmony.
From dissonance to harmony, I can't think of a better way to summarize the immense scope of what we have unpacked today. We live in a world that is fundamentally, structurally, and biologically confusing for our bodies.
Very confusing.
We are navigating a daily sea of fake chemical hormones leaching from our receipts, potent plant estrogens hiding in our health foods, artificial midnight suns beaming from our screens, and a constant vibrating baseline of chronic psychosocial stress draining our mitochondrial batteries. Your hormones, those invisible puppet masters, are being relentlessly hacked.
It is a daunting reality, but the clinical pathways to repair are equally robust.
Exactly. The power to take the strings back is entirely in your hands. By intentionally leveraging natural morning light to trigger your master precursors, by rigorously syncing the timing of your meals to respect your circadian clocks, by focusing on high-quality structural proteins and specific signaling fats, and by relentlessly practicing stillness to lower systemic inflammation, you can protect your cellular batteries.
You can naturally rebuild your endocrine health from the mitochondria up.
And stepping back to view the macro implications of all this research raises a profound final question. We have established that our modern constructed physical environment is the primary driver breaking our hormones.
Right. So what if the future of medicine isn't a better pharmaceutical pill to replace the hormones we lose?
What is it then?
What if the true future of healthcare is architectural? Imagine designing our cities, our homes, and our indoor lighting systems to automatically and passively sync with our circadian biology. What if we engineered an environment that passively heals our endocrine system simply by the act of existing within it?
A world where the environment heals you instead of hacking you. That is a truly revolutionary concept to think about. But until that architectural future arrives, remember that the power to start healing is accessible right now. Take a deep breath. Prioritize getting that sunlight in your eyes tomorrow morning, and start small with your own natural hormonal reset. Do not let the chaotic noise of modern life drown out your fundamental biological rhythm. Thank you for joining us on this massive, illuminating deep dive. Take care of yourselves, protect your batteries, and we'll see you next time.